Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know some of you come from afar. We appreciate you coming out. This is a program we started a couple years ago to try to get more folks sharing their research on history and the things that have happened in West Virginia. We here at the Archives feel that there are 1,000 stories yet to be told, and this was one that was very interesting to us. I happened to talk to Raamie one day, and he mentioned that he worked with Bobby Kennedy, and I'm someone who enjoys the Kennedys a great deal, so I conned him into doing one for us, and I appreciate him being here tonight. When we started to do this, I asked Raamie for his bio, and as I started working on it, he wanted me to make sure that there was one thing that I had added at the bottom, and it had to do with his lovely wife, that she had to be included, and that he had the greatest grandchildren in the world. So, I don't have grandchildren yet, so I'll agree with him wholeheartedly. They are the best grandchildren in the world.
They are.
But Raamie currently serves as Governor Earl Ray Tomblin as a senior advisor. He has served the West Virginia State Senate as an administrative assistant and chief of staff. He also served 4 years as a deputy labor commissioner, and a communication aide to former Governor Arch Moore. In addition, Barker worked as an editor of the Logan Banner, editor of the Williamson Daily News, publisher of the Coal Valley News, copy editor of the Beckley Register Herald, managing editor of the Inquirer Journal, Monroe, North Carolina, and publisher of the Richmond Register in Richmond, Kentucky. For 6 years, he served as a correspondent for WCHS TV and radio. His career includes work in radio, television, magazines, book publishing, newspaper consulting, and public relations. He also did time as a teacher, which I think shows that as he goes through life, he continues to be teaching everybody about West Virginia and the stuff that he knows. So without further ado, Raamie Barker.
Thank you. I do have my wife with me here tonight. It's a young lady on the end. I have to just I'll sometimes introduce her this way that most of you don't get a chance to sleep with your students. But I've been sleeping with her for 41 years. I had her in school, at Chapmanville High School, the same year that I had the governor, in government and in driver education. I don't know if I had you for driver education. It shows in the driving. But it's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored that Commissioner Reed Smith asked me to do this. He's been around government for quite a while. He's done an outstanding job in this building, and I've often said of him and a couple of other of our commissioners and secretaries that you can come over here to the Cultural Center and be the director or commissioner of culture and history and sit on your fanny, do nothing, draw your check, sign a few papers, and get by. He's not that kind of a public servant. He's done an outstanding job here. You get a chance to go down and see the museum downstairs and other improvements in this building and the additions and the programs. He is so proactive, I cannot keep up with him. And but he goes far and above his pay grade in what he does. I'm very proud to be associated with him and the work that he's done here. And I want up front to say that before I say anything else. That
can you? I can see all the words on you. It's
Oh,
really
okay.
distracting. Sorry.
I'll move over here.
Thank you.
But Commissioner Smith is, I have no trouble with hyphenated names, but he is an outstanding leader. I mean, he leads in this field. He has inexhaustible energy, and we're getting a good deal for the salary we pay him. We really are. I want to commend him for what he's done, and especially projects like this. They don't have to do these kinds of things, but I'm glad that they are, and that he's leading in this way. Now, and I have with me Professor Dean Lucas, who is a retired professor of history, in particular Kennedy history, from Southern West Virginia Community Technical College. We've been old friends since I was a student. I was his student at Logan, at the Logan campus, many years ago, probably about that time. And Logan County was a different place then. We didn't have modern highways through there like we have now. And it's changed the whole spectrum and the layout and the economics of Logan County. Of course, we still mine coal. We still mine it proudly. And we're making our contribution, as we always have, to the nation's energy needs. But Dean is a native of Logan County. Dean also, one of the things that he's done, and he can interject and talk here anytime he wants to. I want this to be a very informal presentation. You ask, if you want to ask a question any old time, just throw your hand up. We'll try to get the material that we want to cover. If we don't, then you can come over to my office at the Capitol anytime you want to. I'm in the governor's office. You don't need an appointment. Just walk in. And there's no waiting. But in 1960, Dean was at the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy. And he'll tell you that he's a Roman Catholic, and I'm a Baptist. There's really no basis for us to have any spiritual connection whatsoever. But we all always enjoy each other's give and take on that subject. And he'd probably say something smart-alecky later about that. But Dean was wearing I guess, a clerical collar and jacket as a young student in Washington that day, and he was in a long line trying to get seated, but they saw that they thought he was a priest because he wore his record. So they got him out of the line and moved him up, and he got a good seat. You got to see the president. But
actually, I grew up in Logan County, and 5 and 6 Holden Community Camp, and Dad was Baptist, and Mom was Catholic, but for 12 years of my life, I went to Free Will Baptist Church in Logan County. So then Mom went back to church, and here I lived 4 miles from Logan and didn't know they had a Catholic priest in Logan, and I was 12 years old. So then I ended up, as Raamie mentioned, in 1960. At that time, I was studying for the Catholic priesthood at Baltimore, Maryland, with the Sulpician Fathers. And we were in downtown Baltimore, so obviously we got a free day, you know. And you had to wear your Roman collar, and actually it worked out pretty good, because they thought, well, he's a priest. I was not a priest, but I was a seminarian, you know. So luckily, I got to be there at the speech, saw the speech. I just followed the crowd, and Miriam Anderson and this and that. So I thought, well, I'll just blend in, you know. So, but it was very, very inspirational. That's what that part was.
But and that's where I got my first inklings about politics. It was in the 1960 election. And of course, John Kennedy had come to West Virginia, and the issue that he had to overcome was the Catholic issue, because at that time, I think our demographics in our state was only 3% Catholic, 97% something else, mostly Baptist, and mostly Protestant. But President Kennedy had to overcome the religious issue, had to demonstrate to the Democratic leadership of the Democratic Party that he could win in a state that was predominantly Protestant and not Catholic. He did that, and of course, he's always said, and you will hear when we hear Bobby Kennedy's speech later, when we play it for you, how Bobby Kennedy's view of that issue and how they had to overcome it. I've always thought that if Hubert Humphrey decided not to run in West Virginia, John Kennedy would have never been president, because the issue would not have been resolved. But he did run, and the issue was resolved, and West Virginians led the way in tearing down the barriers of that prejudice that had so long laid there. But we were in unique times. We were in post-World War II times, and this man was a veteran of World War II. And when he said that when he raised his hand to take the oath of office as a sailor, they didn't ask him what his religion was. He was an American citizen, and he was running as a citizen. He wasn't running as the Catholic candidate for president, but the Democratic candidate for president. And I was always thrilled by John F. Kennedy. And of course, the tragic events of November 22nd, 1963, dashed the hopes and aspirations of a lot of people. What could have been has always been the great question of American history. What was the potential? It's the same thing this man, Robert Kennedy, his brother, what could have been? What are the ifs of history? Before we go any further to I have a friend from Logan, Harry Ruloff, who was former mayor of Logan. He's now in exile in Ohio somewhere. But Harry's down here tonight. Harry and I used to work together. I've known Harry for a long, long time. Great civic-minded leader. And I'm amazed that he ever got into politics, but he did. And he won, and he beat a rough team down there. It's sometimes the people who stand up and say, you know, we don't draw a line between the establishment and some challenger. He did that, and he won. And I'm very proud of him. I've always been proud of my association with Harry. But back to 1968, of course, all these events took place. The war in Vietnam cooked up in 1965, when President Johnson called up a couple 100,000 troops to go to Vietnam. These were combat troops. These weren't advisors that we had in there that President Kennedy had put in there, but we were going to war in Vietnam. And it wasn't long ago serious fighting took place. And of course, as you, some of you are too young to know this, but some of the older faces know and understand how this war divided the nation. So President Johnson got on television just a few days before Bobby Kennedy came to Logan and announced that he would not pursue the Democratic nomination for president, which made Kennedy's visit to Logan County even more important, because now we had a person coming who was a viable candidate for office. Normally, I never had any doubt. I felt that Johnson would win, but he backed out and he came out of the race, and there was a lot of conjecture about why he did that and for what purpose. But it got the peace talks started, and so behind the backdrop of all this, 1968 was a bloody year in Vietnam. 500 casualties a week for U.S. troops. And we were paying a high price for somebody else's liberty. But we've always done that in this country. But Bobby Kennedy was a man who was seen as an anti-war leader, but he really truly was a hawk, in my opinion, in that he did not want to withdraw from Vietnam. He wanted the Vietnamese to fight the war with our support. He felt that unilateral withdrawal was the only policy. And there's hundreds and hundreds of volumes of books that have been written on the conjecture about what he was and what he stood for. But you can hear for yourself here the speech that was taped by the radio station WVOW, and the tape unit was right in that rostrum there, and you can see the microphone taped to the top of it. And one of my jobs after I got to introduce him was to make sure that that tape recorder was turned on. So I'm not even the techie. I wasn't much of a techie even then, so I had a lot of concern about whether I actually had it going, but later it proved I got the copy of the tape to prove it. But anyhow.
Why were you selected to?
Okay.
Is that you right there?
Yeah. Believe it or not, that's a 21-year-old Raamie Barker right there. Full head of hair. I don't know where that flat stomach came from. I don't think I had it then, but I had always been interested in politics, and as I grew older, I was a graduating senior at Marshall University, and I was doing student teaching in Logan County that semester, my final semester. It's kind of unusual to get to come back to your home county and do student teaching, but that's the first year they had the program in Logan County. So I came home, I lived at home, I didn't have to pay out a lot of money for room and board. But there was a primary election going on. Of course, I was very interested in Bobby Kennedy's candidacy, and I've been working with a local faction of Democratic candidates as a volunteer. And Claude Ellis, who was a member of that faction, was running for, that's the big heavy guy on the left. Claude was running for circuit clerk. And Claude was one of the principal John Kennedy campaign folks who joined his campaign effort in 1960, and it was pretty much accredited for Kennedy doing such a good job in Logan County. Just as a side note, when JFK announced that he was going to run for president, they did a poll that showed him leading 65 to 35. Then they put out those articles put out that he was a Roman Catholic, and next they took the poll, and the poll reversed it. It was 35, 65, and 100. Just a couple of days. It changed like that. So they knew that this election would be important. But anyhow, Claude Ellis was one of the principal figures in politics in 1960 and in 1968. He'd always been one of the Democratic leaders. A lot of controversy about Mr. Ellis, who later became mayor of Logan. I think after Harry left the job. Did he succeed you? Yes. Okay. Well, Claude became mayor and died while he was mayor a couple of years ago. But Claude, Tom Godby, and Bill Abraham were some political figures, and they contacted Claude and said that Bobby Kennedy was going to come to Logan. They wanted to redo the Kennedy tour. So the John Kennedy tour in 1960 said that's what this was. This was a redo of the JFK tour, but this time it was RFK. And so he was in search of delegates because he'd filed too late to run. You have to file, he missed the filing deadline for the presidential preference primary. So his search was for delegates. And in those days, we elected delegates to the National Convention during the regular primary season. It's done a little differently now, but he was in search of delegates, not in search of votes for in the presidential preference primary. So Claude was told by the Kennedy people that they wanted somebody to introduce Bobby Kennedy, who was Protestant, Baptist, draft age, and mayor. And they looked around, and there I was. So I got to introduce him because I was draft age, Protestant, and male.
Were you nervous or more excited, or?
I was scared to death. When they asked me to do it, I couldn't believe it. I was going to get to actually be on stage, much less meet him, and get to talk to him. But they asked me to do it. I met with the advanced people. They told me what I needed to do, and they named me chairman, but that was pretty much a, you don't have to do a whole lot, because there was a gal named Roberta Kendall who was a school teacher, a little older than me. She had worked in the JFK campaign, who was co-chairman, who did all the decorations, and she took care of all that type of stuff. So I didn't have to do any of that. And but I was invited to do that. Of course, I gladly accepted. And I had some trepidation about it because there had been threats against his life. There are always threats against a Kennedy. And there are some scenes, and they will show you some pictures here where you will see people on tops of the buildings, officers on tops of the buildings with guns. I was afraid, had the fear that something might happen. Somebody might throw a firecracker or something, and they start shooting, and we'd all get killed. And so I had a fear of that. But of course that didn't happen, but it did happen later in Los Angeles to my great pain. But so I met with the advanced people, and then there was a lot of preparation. I was told that to meet him in a car, that he would be in a car that would be coming down Stratton Street, which is the main business street in Logan. I don't have this picture up for you, but I'll show you. If you want to look at it later, it's had some damage, but this was part of the crowd that gathered around the courthouse. Right in the middle there is me, Bobby Kennedy, and behind me is the chief of police. They didn't want uniformed police officers around. And R.D. Platt, who was a retired state policeman, grabbed him by the arm. And he got to the car and he jerked his arm around like he said, no. He said, no, get away. And he said, Raamie's going to take me to the station. So we met, we walked through the crowd, as that picture shows, and got up on the platform, and of course there's a large crowd there. It was, I think, prior to Easter, the Saturday before Easter maybe, or something like that. It was a very warm day, even for that time of the year, and there was about, in my opinion, about 7,000 people that crowded into the courthouse. When I got up on the stage and I looked out, I couldn't believe my eyes, because people were down every street as far as you could see, in all directions. There's people crammed in there. And I can look at some of these pictures and I see folks that have grown up. This happened, 44 years ago? That's a half a century almost of memories of this day. I'm not sure about this, but this guy looks an awful lot like Earl Ray Tomlin. I know he was there that day. And the interesting thing about it, Earl Ray's daddy was running for sheriff with Logan County. But he was running for sheriff on the ticket with the faction, the Democratic faction in Logan County that I was opposed to. So I would have been opposed to his daddy. And the outcome of the election was that as a result of that, the faction that I was supporting that brought Bobby Kennedy to Logan that day, every man on that ticket lost but one man. All of them but one man, and that was Tom Godby, who was our assessor. And he'd been assessed, he went on to be assessor for nearly 30-some years. But that election was an important election because at the time we had a Republican sheriff. We hadn't had a Republican elected anything in Logan County since before the Depression. Started in the 20s when Hoover was president. So we had a Republican sheriff. He eventually got beat in the fall, and Earl Ray's dad became sheriff. And then later in 1970, Earl Ray ran for the House of, 1974, he ran for the House of Delegates, was elected, and been in the legislature ever since until last year when he succeeded the office of governor by virtue of the fact that he's the Senate president. I spent the last 16 years on the staff working for him. We both have mentioned a number of times about the fact that the teacher became a student and the student became a teacher because the stuff he knows he didn't get in my government class, I guarantee you. The stuff he knows about government, he is an expert in state finance. And if I can make a political announcement, or about it, I don't know of anybody smarter on state finance and budget matters and state revenues and taxes and so forth than Governor Tomlin. He's an expert. He's an outstanding guy to work for. He's down to earth. And he's pretty much the same kid I had in class. I mean, he's still, that personality still prevails. So I think we have a great governor, if I may be permitted to say so. And I'm going to vote for him in May, and I'm going to vote for him in November. Okay, having said all that, we'll get back to the history lesson. But, of course, I was very proud to be up there on the platform with Senator Kennedy. I had met him once before in Washington on a trip that I made. But it's one of those things where you just walk around and shake hands. But, we got opportunities to chat a little bit. Later that night, I got to come to Charleston, sit on the stage down at the Municipal Auditorium where he made a major speech on Vietnam. And he'll make some remarks about Vietnam that you might want to ask some questions about later. But if nobody has any questions, Dean, you have anything you want to interject here? Let's listen to his speech. It's about 10-15 minutes long, and they've intertwined some pictures with it. And when you hear the speech, you'll find that the issues haven't changed very much in a half a century. That's what's astounding about politics. The issues always seem to be about the same things.
Present to you Senator Kennedy's campaign secretary in Logan County, Raamie Barker from Jacksonville. My fellow Logan Countyans, my name is 8 years ago today, a young man from Boston came to Logan County. He came here with a dream for you and I. Today, his brother takes his place to fulfill that dream. I present, ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States. up that high. I'm very pleased to be here on the platform with so many old friends. Congressman Humphrey, with whom I served in the Congress of the United States, who is an old friend and an old associate, and who represents his district in the state of West Virginia with such distinction. I appreciate my chairman, Raamie, and all of the efforts that he's made. Give him a hand. Co-chairman Roberta Kendall is taking on this responsibility. And I want to express my particular appreciation to Claude Ellis. I remember back, and political figures have to have memories like everybody else, but I remember back in 1960, when we began this campaign, and President Kennedy was first coming to Logan County. There was some difficulty by getting anybody to introduce him. And Claude Ellis was willing to come forward and help in his campaign and introduce him, and he's always been a friend of ours and an associate of ours, so I'm very grateful to him. And I'm delighted to see all of you. I'm delighted to be back home in the state of West Virginia. Very pleased. I spent more time in Logan County and Logan during the 1960 campaign than back here since, and I think that this city, community has been covered by almost every candidate. I just want to promise you there's a lot more candidates to come for the future. And as all of you know, we have a special place in our heart for Logan County. We have a special place in our heart for the state of West Virginia and the people of West Virginia. Because as John Kennedy always said, it was West Virginia that elected him President of the United States. West Virginia winning the primary here in the state of West Virginia, coming out of the state of Wisconsin with everybody thinking it's going to be so impossible in the state of West Virginia. The people wouldn't listen, spending that month here for that primary and going through all parts of the state and finding that people did listen, that they were interested in the issue. They were interested in what could be done for the future development of the state of West Virginia. They elected him under, I guess, overwhelming odds. And it was that election which in turn led to his nomination in Los Angeles, and in turn led to his election in November. He defeated Richard Nixon and became the President of the United States because of what you did here in the state of West Virginia. He knew that. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very grateful to see all of you. This is an important campaign. And I come here to the state of West Virginia to ask for your help as John Kennedy did 8 years ago. I think we made a great deal of progress over the period of the last 8 years. I think there's a great deal that's been accomplished. We came here in the state of West Virginia and there was one of the highest rates of unemployment anywhere in the United States. But now something's been done about it. Perhaps not enough has been done about it. But the unemployment rate in the state of West Virginia 8 years ago was 13%. In some areas of the state it was up to 20 and 25 and 30%. And as many of you know, there were tens and tens of thousands of children who didn't have enough to eat in the state of West Virginia in 1960. Now those things have changed. The unemployment rate is down to 6%. The income into the state is twice as much now as it was during 1960. Personal income is up over 20% of what it was in 1960. But we still have unemployment here in the state. We passed the Area Redevelopment Act, we passed the Accelerated Public Works Act, and all that's made a difference for the state of West Virginia. There are new roads, there are new highways, there are new industries in the state of West Virginia. But we still have unemployment in West Virginia. We still have young men who can't find jobs in West Virginia. We still have paths that remain to be filled in West Virginia. We still have water pollution in West Virginia. We still have some air pollution in the state of West Virginia. And as we came into the outskirts of the city, we still have inadequate and substandard housing in the state of West Virginia. Until these matters are remedied, until these conditions are changed, we cannot be satisfied, and that's why I run for President of the United States. I want to see changes made. I think that we can do that. I don't say that the problem problems are going to be disappeared, just as President Kennedy did say when he came here in 1960, that these problems were going to disappear. But what he did say, and what I say to you, is that we can say, we can in fact bring new industry into Logan County. We can in fact bring industry into Logan. We can in fact bring new industry into the state of West Virginia. And there are ways in which we can find jobs. We can find jobs for those who are unemployed. We can have the government as the employer of the last resort. We know that there are things to be done. We know that there are hospital clinics that need to be built. We know that we can work on the water pollution. We know we can work on the air pollution. We know that we can do all the kinds of things that need to be done in our educational system. So there are those who need jobs, and there are jobs that need to be done. I say we should put the two together. And if I'm elected President of the United States, that's what I intend to do. And I think there are other things that we can do to bring private industry in here. I think we can give private industry tax incentives, tax credits, to come into an area such as Logan. Just think, we give industry tax credits, tax benefits, to go and pump for oil. We do it for minerals. We do it to build grain bins. We do it to build merchant ships. Why shouldn't we also do it to bring industry into areas that need industry? Areas where there's great unemployment. Areas where people are on welfare. I say what we should do is substitute jobs and employment for the welfare system, and that's what I intend to do. I just don't think the handout or the dole or the welfare system is satisfactory. I think people want jobs. I don't think it's satisfactory for those who have to pay the taxes for the welfare system and see nothing in return for that. And I don't think it's satisfactory for those who are on welfare. I think we should have jobs and employment instead of that. We could cause great production here in the state of West Virginia and in these other areas as well. I think that's what we should do. The government should work at it, and I think private industry should work at it. There should be a close partnership between government and private industry, and I think we could have great success. And that's what I intend to do if we elect me President of the United States. And I'll tell you, I've explained all of these things to my children at home, and it's caught on immensely. I took a poll there before I came down here in West Virginia, just to find out how they felt. I got 4 votes. And then there were 2 from my brother Teddy. We didn't like that much. And then 2 from my sister Pat. And then there were 2 that were reassessing their position. And they said if I got a big reception in Logan and I got a big reception in West Virginia, that they'd come on my side and I get a majority. But I think also, there's another important matter. What I think we have to do is do all in our power as a government and as a people to bring peace to Vietnam. I just received a note that Tony Vogt, who's right here, is off for Vietnam next week, is the son of the editor of the Logan paper here. Could you just stand up? The Logan Banner. The fact is that there are 4 men like him from the state of West Virginia serving in Vietnam per capita than any other state of the Union. There are more casualties, more men been killed from the state of West Virginia, except for Hawaii, than any other state of the Union per capita. The fact is that he carried the majority of the war. My problem with the war, my problem with reservations about the war, is not the fact that we have a commitment there. I'm not in favor of unilaterally withdrawing from Vietnam, but what I do say is that is their war. This is their conflict, and it's not America's war. We can help them, but we cannot win it for them. And I think that's the philosophy that we should have in Vietnam. I think to go on for such a long period of time, the changes that are being made over the period of the last month, but to go on for such a long period of time and have them refuse to draft 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds in Vietnam to fight. To have a representative of the General Assembly get up and say, we're not going to draft those young men, because why should we send young Vietnamese to fight America's war for them? I think that's unsatisfactory. And I don't think that that's respect. I think that's unsatisfactory. young men in Vietnam to buy their way out of the draft. I think it's unsatisfactory that we have a widespread corruption and dishonesty in Vietnam. I think it's unsatisfactory that they haven't put a land reform program in, a social reform program, a political reform program in. And I think with all of the effort that we made in that part of the world, that we have the right that to demand of them that they take these kind of steps to strengthen their government and strengthen the people's support for that government. That's what I stand for. I don't think it should become America's war. I don't think by our casualties, those who have been killed wearing American uniforms, should double 1967 over 1966, and during the same period of time, the deaths of those in the South Vietnamese army should go down. This is their war. Why should our casualties be 3 or 4 times their casualties? This is their country. If they believe in it and feel that it's worth fighting for, they should join the army. They should make the sacrifice. They should be standing along the line of the demilitarized zone, not American troops, not American Marines. I think that they should play a role, and that's what I stand for. And let me say that I would pull back on the search and destroy mission. I would protect those areas of great population centers, and I would try to bring American soldiers home and substitute South Vietnamese soldiers. That's what I think should be done. And let me say, the money that we save from this effort, not just the lives that we save, because we have to face the fact that at times in our history we're going to have to give our lives on behalf of freedom all over the globe. We have to face that. That's our responsibility. But this effort has to be carried by the people of South Vietnam. And the money and the effort that we save, we can put into our problems here at home. We can make sure that we have law and order in the United States, that we don't have riots and violence and lawlessness every summer. I think that's unacceptable in the United States. I think it's unacceptable under our society, and if I'm elected President of the United States, it's not going to be tolerated. And I think that we should make sure that everybody's treated with justice, that men have jobs in the ghetto, that men have jobs in Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, that everybody's treated equally. That if we ask a young man to go 12,500 miles away to fight for us, that we know that when he returns to the United States, he's going to have a decent house, that he's going to have a decent home, and that he's going to have a job, and he's going to be able to educate his children. I think we stand for that as well. We here in the state of West Virginia and across the United States. And I think that the money we save we can put into education to ensure the best possible education for all of our children. To ensure that our children, that they have the ability to go on to college or university. To ensure that those children who do not can find a decent job. That we can put our money into improving the housing here in the state of West Virginia. To constructing more roads and more highways. To bringing industry into the state. To do something about cleaning up our streams and our rivers. And to keep our air pure. That's what I think we should be applying ourselves to. I think that's a top priority for any president of the United States, for the United States government, and for the American people, and that's what I think. So I come here to West Virginia and I ask for your help. I think that we can do better. I think under a Democratic administration that a lot has been accomplished. But I don't think that we can run on just what we've done in the past. I think we have to run on what we're going to do for the future. And there are all these great paths, the great divisions that now exist between Americans, the bitterness that is spreading between Americans and all sections of the United States, between races. All of these things have to be healed. We have to apply our best energies and our best talent and our courage to dealing with these kind of problems. And we can deal with them. We've had problems before in the past, but we've defeated them. We've dealt with them. And that's what I intend to do. That's why I run for President of the United States. And that's why I come to you. This is an important election. This is going to determine what direction the United States is going to move in. This is the year 1968, where we're going to discuss openly the issues. Not put them under the rug. Not act as if they don't exist. But discuss openly the issues. The issues that divide us as Americans, the issues that divide us from the rest of the world, and what we can do about them. That's what I intend to do in this campaign. That's what I tried to do in the state of West Virginia. And now I ask for your help. You can make a difference. need your help. I need the votes in the delegation of West Virginia as President Kennedy did in 1960. I come here and ask for your assistance. I need your help for the delegates that are going to go to represent the state of West Virginia and Chicago. If we can get some delegates from West Virginia representing you and supporting me in Chicago, I think that we can win in Chicago. And I think that if we win in Chicago, we'll do the same thing that we did in 1960. We'll beat Richard Nixon in November. These are important and crucial times. Francis Bacon once said, in this theater of man's life, it is left only to God and to angels to be lookers on. We can't be lookers on during this important and critical time. Good men must join together in dealing with the problems that affect our country. I come here to ask for your hand. I come here to ask for your support. I come here to ask for your vote. George Bernard Shaw once said, some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not? I think that's what guides the state of West Virginia. That's what my God. And I come here to ask for your support and help in this coming election. Give me your help, give me your hand, and give me your vote. Thank you.
Similar jobs, better jobs, the environment, housing, things like that. We're still talking about those things, and still fighting about those things. I think that picture right there is my favorite. I know that a copy of that was sent recently from here to Robert Kennedy Jr., who now has that picture. And of course we find him coming back to West Virginia fighting over environmental issues. There's a bunch in Logan County tomorrow arguing, fussing over Blair Mountain, whether we should strip mine it or make it a park. Those issues still prevail today. So I don't, you know, it's like human nature never changes, so do political issues never change. They vary a little bit, but the root, the heart of those issues never change. Just put that picture up, the one of the four of us. There we go. This picture, there's a lot of political, I'll just give you some idea of political chicanery. There's Mr. Ellis on the left, Bobby Kennedy in the middle, and the fellow next to him is John Davis, who was an attorney here in Charleston. Mr. Davis at that time was still associated with Governor Barron as his law partner at that time. Of course, that's me. I had been sitting in the chair and I jumped up to find out what was going on and had my finger up my nose. So lots of people want to know why I had my finger up my nose, because I didn't really know. I just had to jump up when the picture was made. The fellow on the right is Bus Perry. Bus was a member of the House of Delegates in the 40s, and he was the county recreation director. And he was involved in politics, and there's a whole chapter about Bus Perry that ought to be written in West Virginia's history about the financial manipulations of legislative funds back in the 40s when he was in the legislature. So I think I'll say on that one. But Mr. Davis, there, you'll notice that Mr. Davis has a plaque in his hand, and Senator Kennedy has a plaque in his hand, and Claude Ellis has a plaque in his hand. Well, the plaque for Claude Ellis was this was a scheme dreamed up by Mr. Davis. I'll talk about him. He's been dead for a number of years now, but the plaque for Mr. Ellis was given to him as Outstanding Citizen of Logan County for the year 1968. And Bobby Kennedy, of course, has a plaque given to him as an Outstanding American United States Citizen of the year for 1968. And Mr. Davis has one Outstanding West Virginian of the year for 1968. And none of that made any sense. Still doesn't today. It has nothing to do with anything. It was just plaques that they gave to those three men. And these plaques were arranged so that Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Davis could have their picture made together, and all these, everybody else cropped out. And so this picture was cropped, and a copy of it sent to the Charleston Gazette and was published in the Charleston Gazette the following day, or the following week. And this was done so that Mr. Davis could say to the politicians here in Kanawha County that he and Senator Kennedy were united, okay, for other political considerations and so forth. So that's why that was all done. All these plaques were done, and this guy, he was the guy who dreamt this up. A couple of years later, when Ted Kennedy was injured in the airplane crash, Davis called me up, and no, it wasn't an airplane crash, it was Chappaquiddick when Miss Kopechne was killed, drowned, and he wanted me to get together a petition that says we still like Ted Kennedy for president. I mean, he tried all his life to get in with the Kennedy family and to get a Kennedy in the White House so that he could be associated with him politically, and it would help him politically, locally, and so forth. So I thought he was a genius, but he just used his genius in the wrong way. But that's one interesting sideline to this story, was how that picture came about. Bus Perry over here just got in the picture because he knew the picture being made. And there's a book called 40 Years of Mountain Politics, and you'll find a copy of that picture, and that is probably in this library somewhere. But I remember I sat right next to Senator Kennedy when he was making his speech, and I'll always remember his hands. As he spoke, his hands shook like that. And he had places on his hands where people would, when he was in a crowd, they would grab his hands or would scratch him, and he had little nicks and places and scars and things like that. And there were no cufflinks on his shirt. His cuffs were open, and that was so nobody could reach and grab that and pull it away and so forth. But they shook hands, and everybody said, had pleasantries. Tony Hilton, remember he mentioned about the young man Tony Hilton who was going to Vietnam. Well, Tony went to Vietnam and served his tour of duty. Later became publisher over at Hinton, the newspaper at Hinton, and now he lives in Morgantown, retired. His dad was on the stage there. Charlie Hilton was my editor. He was one of the men that trained me in the profession of journalism. I didn't get my journalism training at Marshall. I went into education. Later got a master's in journalism at Marshall, but my basic journalism training was on the job, and that's how you became a reporter in those days. But I never started out to be a reporter, but I wound up being one, and now God help me, I'm in politics. So those are just a few of those remembrances, and as I said, Senator Kennedy stopped in Madison. We got over to Ethel, West Virginia, which is a little coal mining community just before you get to Blair Mountain. We stopped at Ethel, and some ladies came out and gave him a quilt so that he could take it and give it to Ethel, his wife. Those are some of the things you didn't read about. They're not in stories. Then he went to Madison. There were a few thousand people in Madison and a rally there, and on to Charleston and the theater downtown, which is next to the mall. and made a speech about Vietnam. You'll notice that his position was that the Vietnamese should be fighting their own war, but he also, he had a very strong opinion about draft deferments. He didn't believe that college students should be deferred for the draft because he felt like that maybe farmers, people in agriculture, people in other professions were just as important as those who went to college, and they never had the same opportunities, and many of them were drafted. Did you know that, Dean?
Well, I read with Raamie here, being in education and teaching and all of that. Well, obviously one thing I always try to do is review the entire literature, read every book that I can possibly read and all this and that. And I've talked to Raamie quite a bit before this, but this Thurston Clark has a book out called The Final Campaign, The 82 Days That Inspired America, Bobby Kennedy's 82 Days, from once he announced and started. And in that book, I underlined a lot of different things, but just like Raamie said there, a phrase that I saw in the book was something that caught my attention, was the principle of equal sacrifice. And Raamie, that kind of fits in with, no matter who you are, we're all Americans. We should all have that feeling of, well, if one sacrifices, why shouldn't we all sacrifice? It should be equal, not just some, not just for others. So I think, and that gets into the idea of the shared responsibility. So you get equal sacrifice, you get shared responsibility, and then obviously we all go back to, and it was built into him, into the Kennedy blood and with his brother and all, but it's a classic of John Kennedy, ask not. And if people will sacrifice for the right reason, if there's something to sacrifice for, And I know as soon as a book would come out, a book came out, this whole book was ask not. I made sure Raamie got a copy of it. So, Raamie, does that fit into to what you were saying there about?
Dean is, while he was a professor at Southern Community College, set up a course of study on JFK and RFK, and he had, maybe 4 classes or something like that a semester.
No, actually, what happened, I'll be very brief.
They developed a great amount of history.
Oh, yeah. Very briefly, what happened, I'd been at the college all these years, and students knew that, well, he did this and that, and they said, would you teach one class on the Kennedy family? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, at this day and time, unless you have to take a history class, not many people will sign up for it. So I said, well, we'll try one. It became so popular without me knowing it. I taught one every semester for 15 straight semesters. I ended up teaching 15 classes for college credit at Southern on the Kennedy family only. And Raamie, and I'll be very honest, Raamie was a big part. I always could call on Raamie. Raamie would always take the time to come in, to share, to talk, not just on Robert Kennedy or John. He had the whole gamut with it. So I think that over these years, it's, I don't know how this all came about, but it did. And it's even, I'll tell you what it does, though. It leads you into something like you call connections. Keep that word in mind, connections. There's a lot of connections through the Kennedy family with our lives because we all have the same thing in life. We suffer, we have to deal with grief, with pain, with this and that. And I guess you kind of vicariously live a life thing there. But by me being retired and living in Lexington, Kentucky, I hang around at a lot of bookstores, and I end up doing programs at some of the bookstores. You would be surprised. It might surprise you to know how many people in Lexington, Kentucky want to do some programs just on the Kennedy family. It's amazing.
I know there's a lot of controversy recently in the news about President Kennedy when he was in the White House. And people have asked me questions about that. You know, I think as I've grown older, I've learned to understand that while we look up to our leaders, we expect them to be more than we are ourselves, but they're human beings, they're men. I doubt that life in the White House or any house is perfect in every way. But there's a great deal to admire about these men and what they've done. Ted Kennedy, for example, did not enjoy the success nationally that his brothers did, but he was the author of more legislation probably than most senators in the history of the U.S. Senate. And a lot of things that we have some of it I don't agree with. Some of it's not worth the paper it's written on. But they made this commitment to service. And Ted Kennedy, for example, got to live to see grandchildren. Jack Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy didn't. Jack Kennedy served a very short period of time as president. Bobby Kennedy a relatively short period of time in elective life. They didn't get to achieve things probably that Ted Kennedy got to achieve, but Ted Kennedy will never have probably the position in history, at least political history, that his brothers had. He will have certainly a great place in senatorial history. And there's a 8mm movie, I think they had this first time tonight that I had seen this. I've never seen this. It's just very short.
Yeah, this was donated by the Womack family, and when we were looking through some of the photos, we think we ID'd the guy that shot the film. It's like everyone else's home movies, but it's very, very interesting. Just give it a second here.
There's a policeman on top of the building that I told you about. Subject that is. But the whole movie is just this little snippet of history. A couple of weeks later, Ted Kennedy came to Logan and conducted a rally for his brother, and we had similar success in the outcome of that. It was held. It was held inside Logan at the field house, and there was a large crowd there. There's old Barker right there. It's funny that, it's weird to see yourself the way you looked back then. It was a great day. I mean, I enjoyed it. It was fun, and I'll never forget it. It was just like yesterday. I could point out and name almost everybody on that platform. They were all political figures. There was a book that was written by Keith Davis in Logan called The Logan County Tough Boys, which talks about more in depth about the politics of Jeff Kennedy, money, and so forth. And there are interviews in there from people who actually participated in some of the wheeling and dealing that went on. I asked Arch Moore one time about a deal. I wasn't working for him at the time, but I asked him as a reporter about the deal. He said, where did you cut that deal? He said, right in that very chair where you're sitting. Well, it was in Kanawha County. It wasn't Logan. A lot of the things that happen in politics don't happen locally. They happen in other places, and they spread out. So, I think that's right. But, yeah.
Real quickly, I've seen John F. Kennedy speak, and a lot of times he didn't use any notes. Did Robert F. Kennedy use any notes to your recollection in this speech?
Not in that speech. No, he didn't use any notes at all. Now he had a speech the speech that he gave later that night here in Charleston. it was a draft, they had what I call a scripted speech, because it was his policy on Vietnam that he was talking about. But Dean knows this guy right here. What was the story behind him?
You know, it's amazing how we're all connected, no matter where we go, but this person there was from Whitten Creek, and his son now is a manager of a BB&T bank in Lexington at Tate's Creek Road, and I go in and talk to him, and actually, I keep him up to date. He gets in touch with his dad. We're supposed to get together when I get back, so that I can update him as to what actually went on, you know. So it just keeps going on and on and on. And here's a question I've researched for many years, and I think it's a fascinating question. And I know we could all have probably a whole day to answer it, if we could answer it, is how did John F. Kennedy really come to our state in 1960, being about 3% or 4% Catholic, and he actually won our state? How did he really pull it off? You know,
His
charisma.
Charisma, yeah.
We went to the park and saw the Kennedy family, and I can't remember who was there. JFK was Ethel there? Somebody, there was one of the women there, and they were just so
Probably
charismatic.
Eunice. Probably Eunice.
Yes,
It was
yes,
Eunice.
yes. Yeah, we went to the city park in Parkersburg, and they had an ox roast there, and they were just so charismatic. I mean, that sounds simplistic, but I think so. Because we didn't really know them. It's as you said, in Parkersburg, we didn't really know the family too much. And there was one of the women there, but she was very charismatic.
I just finished reading Chris Matthews' book on JFK. I think it's just entitled Jack Kennedy, Unwilling Hero or something. I'm getting so I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can remember what I did 50 years ago.
Elusive hero.
Elusive Hero. That's it, Elusive Hero. And I learned a lot about how he organized the presidential campaign in 1960. He went to every state over a 4-year period of time and laid the groundwork. It wasn't just a flash in the pan. He decided in 1956, when he was almost became vice presidential nominee with Adam Stevenson, and he made up his mind to run in 1960, and because it was an open race. Eisenhower was term limited, and so there was going to be a new president. But he decided that he spent weekends and all the time that he had going to all the states in the country setting up organizations. And he did the same thing in Massachusetts. He was working with him a few times, and then later he was unsuccessful with Governor Rockefeller in 1972, and Governor Moore beat him. But Bob McDonnell was a real genius, but politically. But JFK had these organizations in every state. Bobby Kennedy didn't have that opportunity because he didn't decide to run until that latter time. But he put together a pretty strong organization pretty quickly. There's a lot of question about whether he would have won the nomination, because Hubert Humphrey was getting he was getting whole state delegations. Just, Lyndon Johnson would call up the chairman of the party and say, I want your 60 or 70 votes for Hubert. And Johnson, I think, thought that when he really got to the convention, that it would be just overwhelming for him, that they would demand that he run. That didn't happen. And of course, Johnson died before he would have served out another term anyhow. So there were maybe some other issues why Lyndon Johnson did not run, because he had a very, very bad heart, as we know. But we don't know much about our presidents sometimes while they're serving, but we learn more about them later. Yes?
Which of the family, were there any family members with this trip with?
On this one?
Uh-huh.
Not that I know of. There were, as I said, there were these advanced men. This was one, I don't remember his name. But this fellow here, his name is Don Dale. He was on the U.S.-Australian, or the U.S., they played Australia for the World Tennis Championship. And he was an advanced man. And he just died recently. I saw on the news. And it was noted that he was one of Bobby Kennedy's associates in this election. But in subsequent campaigns where Ted Kennedy, he came back to West Virginia a number of times to campaign, lots of family members have come, and I've met other family members in Boston recently, or not recently, 3 or 4 years ago, we went up there, and I was up there at a reception, and with the state treasurer, and met Edward Kennedy, Jr., and spoke. We had a long conversation. I was sure he was going to take his daddy's seat, but he didn't. But a long conversation with him. But he's a different kind of a Kennedy. He's a banker, investment banker. He handles a lot of the state of West Virginia's money, and I think he makes too much money to run for public office. A lot of the Kennedy generation. Now they don't run for office so much as they get involved in charitable activities and environmental efforts and things like that nature. But because they understand the risks of running. There are risks at running for dog catchers. You put your name out there and somebody might just chop it to pieces. So a lot of people don't want it.
I liked your introductory remarks. Were those your own words, or did they script that for you?
To speak the part that I made, it came right out of my mouth just as I stood there. I thought about what I was going to say, and I was going to say this. I made one tremendous grammatical error, if you noticed. I said he came to Logan County for you and I. That's wrong. That's wrong grammar. I'm sorry about that. I should have studied harder when I was at Marshall. But believe me, my knees were knocking up there. And but I've learned since in public speaking that when you speak, you're actually just one set of eyeballs coming back at you. When I look at the crowd, there's only one of you. There's only one of you. So I'm talking to you individually as I speak. So that you learn some things about public speaking. But you've got to love your topic. You know. Go ahead.
One of the classes that we taught for 3 hours credit was called The Legacy of the Kennedys. And Raamie would always come in and share, but I think I heard Raamie say that it was part of their legacy that he was inspired by the Kennedys to enter public service.
Well, in politics,
or government.
I've always been except for when I worked for the power company, I was always in journalism or education or some public service. In the last 16 years in state government, 4 years, it's kind of odd. I noticed that if somebody could ask the question, why did I work for Arch Moore for 4 years and then turn around and work for a Democrat for 16 years? That's because I'm smart, I guess. No, I'm kidding. Your life takes twists and turns. I always admired Arch Moore, and I always wanted to work with my student, who I knew could become governor, and now he has become governor. And while I don't play as big a role in the governorship as I did when he was Senate president, it's still exciting and great to be there. I'm near retirement age, so I may be hanging it up, moving on, doing some other things in the near future, but I hope that everything that I do will be in service. I don't think we're put on this earth to do anything but to serve others. I don't care what you do, you're serving somebody, in some way, in some capacity. That's what we're here for, yeah.
One more question, sorry, for you. What years did you teach? I want to know that those students were interested. Was it their parents that liked the Kennedys, or what years was that?
It was starting around 2001, 2002, back in there. And every semester, I would teach a class on the Kennedy family.
But what did you ever ask the students? Why would they like the?
Well, I tell you, everywhere you go, seems like not only it's Southern, but everywhere I go, and people seem that they're just fascinated by the Kennedy family, and whatever the fascination is, it's almost like they're our family or something, almost a royal family or something,
Camelot.
sort of a Camelot thing. but they're just fascinated by the Kennedy family. And everywhere I go, I run into that same curiosity. And I don't know, I'll give you some examples of here how it connects and all. Wouldn't have time to tell you everything, and I'll be very brief as I can, but I know that if you look at the kids that you meet in Robert Kennedy's family, for example, they're carrying on that tradition. Oh, about 5 years ago or 6, the youngest daughter, Rory, Ethel was pregnant with Rory when she never saw her father. So she has gone worldwide in documentations and documentaries to deal with issues that her dad would have dealt with. And she did a little controversial documentary several years back called American Hollow. So she went to eastern Kentucky, went to Perry County, stayed with the Bowling family, and studied the one family, welfare. It's quite an interesting document. She came to the University of Kentucky, and I was there. She showed that film, and you will not believe how emotional it was, because some people were there to attack, like, here you are, a rich family, and you've come down here and you've taken advantage of us down. It was she didn't say a word. And then after the emotion died down, it kind of got in. I stopped, talked to her, bought her American Hollow book and all that. Then, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I went to Wheeling Jesuit University. And one of the daughters is Carrie Kennedy. And she was married to the current governor, Cuomo. And she gave the keynote address up there, and I met her, talked to her, and she had done so much work, and she had a big book called Truth to Power. And I said, well, why don't you just autograph this, and I'll take it back and show it to the students. And this is what got me. Here's what she wrote. With hope, this inspires. See that connection? And Robert Kennedy was selling hope in 1968. Then I've been emailing and talking to Kathleen Kennedy for a couple of years now. A lot of other connections. But I found out last year that she was coming to Lexington, Kentucky, which she did. So last June the 3rd, last year, she came to the Marriott Griffin Gate. I went to it, met her, we talked a lot. We emailed back and forth, and I kind of keep her up to date on things that are going on in West Virginia. But right on the program cover was a picture of her with her father, and they had a little quote there that after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy sent a note to his kids and says, do something for your country, love Dad. That was that. So my other connection with the Kennedys is through a Catholic connection, because, real quick, show you the connection. Ties it all together. Maybe y'all should come to Kentucky when Raamie and I do this in Kentucky. We're going to do it, down there in Lexington. But Ethel Kennedy comes from a very wealthy family, Skagels. I happen to be working on a biography of a Trappist monk who was a friend of the Skakel family. And Ethel Kennedy went to Manhattan College up in New York, Manhattanville, I think. And she had a philosophy teacher named Dan Walsh. She really liked Dan Walsh. So Dan Walsh ended up becoming Kathleen Kennedy's godfather. So then, Dan Walsh ended up coming to Kentucky, taught at Bellarmine University. It's now Bellarmine University, now in Louisville, professor. He was ordained a Catholic priest, came down to the Trappist monastery at Gethsemane. He's actually buried there. So when we would communicate, I'd say, it'd be nice if you'd come to Logan and Kentucky and visit the monastery and all this and that. And before she came to give her talk that night. She had been at Indianapolis the day before. If you want to read another Robert Kennedy, read that talk and watch that video of Martin Luther King when he found out. But Kathleen then went to Gethsemane, had lunch with some of the monks who are good friends of mine. She went out to the grave of her godfather, said a prayer. Then she went to the chapel that was dedicated in honor of her grandparents, the whole Skakel family. And in 1955, when Ethel Kennedy's parents were actually accidentally killed in a plane crash, the abbot that I'm doing the book, Dom James, preached the funeral. So remember the word I said, connections. And you know, Raamie and I have been connected, and the more I get around Raamie, I learn more and more from Raamie, you know, different perspectives that I don't have, you know. But hope it didn't take up too much time, Raamie.
No, but I think we've probably run out of time.
Just wanted to share that.
All right, let's give these guys a hand. And if you're interested in the 1960 campaign, I'll put a little plug in for our website. Back in 2010, the archives here went through and traced every place the Kennedy family went. So you can go on our website and they can tell you which family member went where. And it's very shocking to realize they were everywhere a lot of the time in 1960. And even going back, we even went back into the 50s to see that I think JFK's first trip was to Wheeling for a Catholic meeting there at the Ohio Valley Catholic group. There.
What is your website?
If you go to www.wvculture.org, I'll have a sheet up here that'll show you how to get to our online exhibits. That'll probably be easier than me spouting out a bunch of letters and reading it wrong later. But we have those up here, and I'll make sure everybody gets one if you want one. So let's thank Raamie and this gentleman here for helping us out today.